Hey everybody, welcome to Getting Baked. I am your Uncle Josh, and today we are making French bread. We're making French bread tomorrow, which means this evening we're going to make a poolish. What is a poolish, you ask? A poolish is a pre-ferment. It's going to be a mixture of equal parts white flour and water with just a tiny little bit of yeast. And then we're going to let that sit and ferment overnight for a total of about 13 to 14 hours. It's going to get really gassy and bubbly and smells of alcohol, such of that going on. When that's finished, then tomorrow we'll come back and we'll mix in our remaining flour. We'll mix in more water, and we'll mix in salt and a little bit more yeast to finish our loaves. So without further ado, we're going to start like we do all of the time. We're going to start with our little scale. We're going to measure out our yeast. And for our overnight poolish here, we barely need any. We need 0.2 grams of instant dry yeast, which is a very little amount. So let's see what we've got going on here. 0.17, 0.18, 0.22. So we'll start with that. We're going to call that good enough. Again, you'll be able to maybe see this as I pour it into my glass. Very little amount of yeast. Okay, done with that step. Next step is we need to add our water. Now the poolish is always equal parts flour and water, and we're using a total of half of our flour. Now our whole loaf is going to have 500 grams of flour, so we need 250 grams to mix our poolish. We're not quite there yet, but we need equal parts water, so we need 250 grams of this water to mix in with our yeast. And this water, in my case, is room temperature today. That's about 74.8 degrees in our house. Again, we keep it a little warm in here. If you keep your house closer to 70, you might warm this water up to about 80 degrees or so. All right, so again, I'm looking for 250 grams of this water. There's my 100, my 200, 248 grams. 251 grams. We'll call that good enough. Set that aside. I'm going to dump this water quickly. And we'll give that a stir, of course. And encourage that yeast to start dissolving in that water. All right. 250 grams of water, 0.2 grams yeast. Now we're looking for 250 grams of flour. This recipe, I'm going to use, total recipe, I'm going to use 45% all-purpose flour, 45% bread flour, and 10% of a stone ground white whole wheat flour. But for the poolish part of it, I'm just going to use equal parts, 125 grams of all-purpose and 125 grams of white flour. Or I'm sorry, bread flour. They're both white flours. 73, I'm going to dump the rest of this down. Everybody being out of flour and yeast has been kind of annoying. I've been baking for months. And then we get one little pandemic and everyone buys up all the baking supplies at the store. At any rate, at least they're baking, right? So I've got 150 there of my all-purpose flour. We're going to add the bread flour next. I'm going to take this up to 250 grams. I just went a little bit over there. And I think we went over there because I think I measured 150 of my AP flour, not 125 as I meant to. But that's okay. We're not going to notice that much of a difference there. So all right, I've got my 250 grams of flour. I have my 250 grams of water with 0.2 grams of instant dry yeast mixed in. And now with this, just as we've done in the other videos, we're going to dump our water and yeast in. We're going to mix it around with our fingers. Got a dough scraper to clean up a little bit. Now this is going to be way, way wet compared to most of our doughs because it's basically 100% hydration. So the texture is going to be way off. It's going to be a lot more soupy. But anyway, let's start this in there. All that good. And we'll get to mixing here. The French breads with poolish are by far my favorite. Something about this poolish gives it a, I don't even know how to describe it. To me, it's almost vinegary. It's acidic. It has a real sharpness to the flavor of the ultimate bread that we make, and I really, really enjoy it. Later on in the series, we'll make an Italian loaf as well. Italian loaves are done in a similar manner. They use what's called a biga instead of a poolish, but it's a very similar process, and there's not a whole lot of difference. But one thing I did once, and maybe we'll do that someday too, I made the French and the Italian side by side, one with the poolish, one with the biga. They're a very similar process. Again, the total ingredients in my recipes were, quantities anyway, were exactly the same. But it was surprising how different the breads actually taste at the end. Again, I think the French has this kind of sharp, acidic, kind of vinegary tone to it, and the Italian has a hint of that, but seems to carry a lot more underneath, a lot more earthy kind of flavors and such too. So that's a fun experiment, and when we get there, we'll get there. But for now, this is already mixed. And I'll pick this up to show to you. It's very wet, very goopy compared to what our other doughs have looked like at this point. So that's all we've got for this part. I've got a lid here. I'm going to scrape my fingers off one last time. I'm going to put this lid on. It's about 12:35. I guess technically it's morning then. So we'll be back tomorrow afternoon between probably like 1:30 and 2:30, and we will look at the poolish at that point. It'll be big, it'll be full of bubbles, it'll stink like alcohol, and then we'll mix our final dough, and we'll continue on from there. So thanks for looking, everybody. We'll see you tomorrow. All right, we are back, continuing our French bread. We have our poolish here. You can see it's grown quite a bit. Pop this lid off. Very stinky. I don't think I can show you this very well. I'll attempt. But it kind of looks like a pancake that's about half cooked. Lots of bubbles on top. And you can kind of tell when your poolish is done. If you stand over it and stare down, there was one, you'll just kind of see a bubble or two pop on the surface every few seconds. There's another over here. Looks like another one up here. So it's clearly done. We're going to set this aside for a second while we get everything else ready to mix. So we are going to actually start with our dry ingredients this time. Got my scale here and my Cambro tub zeroed out. And we're looking for a total of, again, 500 grams of flour. We have 250 grams already in our poolish. So we need a total of 250 more grams of flour. We're going to do 100 grams of bread flour. We're going to do 100 grams of all-purpose flour. Well, we're going to do 92 grams of bread flour, 93. And we'll do 107 of all-purpose flour then. And then we're going to use 50 grams of a stone ground white whole wheat flour. I just like the texture that gives, and it gives it a little bit more of a flavor as well. So that's 199. Come on, we can do it there. 200 grams. Okay, now we need our 50 grams of our stone ground white whole wheat flour. It's a little bit darker in color, maybe slightly coarser as well, and it's definitely higher in protein than the all-purpose or the bread. slightly. So all right, 250 grams. Done with our flours. Probably, no, we're not quite done with the scale, but I'll set it aside for now. Next, we need about 10.5 grams of salt. Because we didn't have any salt added to our poolish. If you remember, it was just flour, water, and a tiny amount of yeast. So we're looking for 10.5 grams of salt. Just under 10. Yeah, we're at 10.9. We'll call that close enough. We're going to dump our salt right in with our dry ingredients this time. That's the first video we've done that in. Now we want 1.5 grams of our instant dry yeast. So, oh goodness. This is, I made a mess. Let's put this back on grams. We'll zero it back out. Again, we're looking for 1.5 grams. This is a bad time to spill yeast, as the stores are all out. That's just a little over 2 still. Put a little bit back. We're going to try to rescue most of this. 1.8. All right, 1.53 grams of yeast. So we'll sprinkle that in there. I'm going to try to rescue a little bit of this in my cup because it's like gold these days. So I'll set that one aside and that one aside. Okay. Done with that scale. Lastly, we'll bring our other scale back in. We need 125 grams of water. And my water, I believe I have right around 90 some odd degrees. Let's check it out here. Coming in about 91 right now, which is perfectly fine. Again, if your house is cooler, say you keep your house around 70 or so, heat this water up maybe to 95. So let's measure this out next. Looking for 125 grams of water. I'm already over. Now this seems like very little water, but keep in mind our poolish already has a lot of water in it. $124, which is real close. Now we're at 126. We're going to call that good enough. Let's set that aside. I'm going to grab a bowl quickly. And we're just going to put the rest of that water in here. I'm going to use that so this doesn't get too stuck to me. All right, so our final step, I can get rid of this scale for now, is we have to combine our poolish with our flour salt yeast mixture here. First, I'm going to give this a good mix, get it all incorporated, evenly dispersed, so to speak. We're going to want a dough scraper for this step. I've got a bowl of water. I'm done with this. No, that's the one I need. Sorry about that. This is my 125 grams of water. So to get our poolish out of the tub, it's going to be sticky. We're going to use our water. We're going to pour it right around the edges. Okay? And now we can use our hand or our dough scraper. The scraper's real nice here. Just going to scrape those edges away. Pull it all towards the center. And once it's loosened up a bit, we're just going to upend it. Dump it right into our mix here. Last step is we're going to scrape all around in here. Get all this gooey, stinky poolish out of here. Down into our dough. Okay, that looks pretty good. Now it's time to mix, which we've done before. Start like this. This is a little bit more difficult to mix because this poolish has already developed a little bit of glutens, so it tends to stick together more than when you're mixing from dry. But we'll just try to mix this dry mixing here. We're going to have to pinch this one quite a lot with our fingers like this in order to get it all incorporated. But at the beginning, we just keep dusting this dry flour up onto the wetter spots of the poolish. And we do have our bucket of water here on the side this time, so that one of these points I'm going to scrape my hand off, and then I'm going to dip my fingers in that water as I continue to mix this, so that I don't continue to carry so much of it out of here, because as you can see right now, I've got a lot of dough stuck to me. So let's scrape a lot of this down. Boom, boom, boom. One more finger to go. A little bit off that side. We'll just kind of dip our finger there real quickly. Pinch some of this off. Drop it all down. Now we're going to kind of fold this a little bit, kind of like we do halfway through our bulk fermentation process. Again, this up until now was like our pre-fermentation process. So I'm going to pinch this and fold it. It's really sticky. This is a 75% hydration total, so that's a pretty wet dough, as you can see. So I think we've got everything pretty well incorporated here, and that's really our first step. So I'll scrape my finger off one more time here, but I think we're going to be about done with this video. This bread is going to take about 2 folds. We're going to do those in about 30 minutes and then in about 60 minutes, respectively, from now. At which point it will continue to bulk ferment for about 2 more hours. So we'll be back in about 30 minutes to fold, another 30 to fold again, about 2 hours after that to make our loaf, and then roughly an hour, hour and a half after that to bake a loaf of bread. So thanks again for looking, everybody. We'll see you soon. All right, so it has been 30 minutes. We're going to apply our first fold to our French dough. You can probably tell it's spread out quite a bit. It's not quite to the edges of the tub, but again, it's a very high hydration dough, so it's going to spread. To fold, we're just going to dip our right hand here in a little bit of warm water. We're just going to grab a section of the dough, pick it up, stretch it, pull it over the rest of it. We're going to do that around all the edges here, you know, 3 to 5 times maybe. This is still quite wet. And we are working probably a little more moisture into this with our dipping our hand in the water here, but that's okay. The recipe kind of calls for that, so we see one more good fold here. That looks good to me. Now you can kind of tell we've got more of a ball. The trick now is we're going to try to flip this upside down and put the seam side down, so to speak, but it likes to stick to the bottom of the tub. So there we go. We got it. All right, so that is all we need for our first fold. And we're going to be back in about 30 minutes to do our second fold. So until then, thanks for watching. We'll see you soon. All right, we're back another 30 minutes later, and we're going to apply our second fold. The dough is spread out again, Maybe not quite as much as the first time, but that's actually good because that means that the glutens are developing. So again, we'll dip our hand in the water here. Start on this part, pick it up, fold it over, and I can already tell it's holding together more. It's a little stickier. Over here. Still very wet though. This little piece. One more off the edge here. And again, just like last time, our last step here is going to be to turn the whole thing upside down and kind of tuck these seams we just created by folding it underneath, like so. All right, and that's really it for our second fold. And that is our last fold of this dough. So at this point, we're going to recover it. And it's going to sit for 2 more hours, at which point we will get it out of its tub and make a loaf, proof the loaf, and bake some bread. So we'll be back in about 2 hours. Thanks for looking. See you soon. Okay, we're back. It is about 5:45. About 3 hours since we started our loaf, or our bread ball anyway. About 2 hours since our last fold. And you can see our dough ball has grown quite a bit. So now we're going to loaf it and let it proof for about an hour. When we're done making it into a loaf here and getting it into its proofing basket, we will turn on the oven at 475 degrees. We will preheat a Dutch oven in there with the lid on for the entire hour that this proofs. So we're going to flour up our work surface a little bit. We're going to flour our hands a little bit because we're going to be working with this. And last step, we're going to flour around the outside of this tub so that we can get our hands in there and remove this as easily as possible. All right. Lastly, we'll go ahead and we're going to have to flour our proofing basket as well a little bit. These are nice because once you've used them a few times, they're kind of, you know, ready to go, I guess. Okay, so we'll start pulling the dough away from the sides of the tub. You're going to want to be able to add a little more flour to your fingers on the sides as you go. Flour is your friend. Flour is a friend. All right, so we're getting real close there. I got a little more stuck to my fingers than I care for. Get underneath it. And we're going to drop it into our left hand and out onto the counter. All right. Again, I got a little more on my fingers than I care for. Well, that's okay. All right. Now just a tiny bit of flour on the top of this, just to get rid of some of the stickiness. But we don't want to fold too much dry flour into our loaf, right? So just kind of work that out in kind of a circle shape. And to make our loaf, we're going to do the same thing we do in the middle. We're going to fold it over itself. Only difference being at the end of it, we're going to pull it on a dry piece of counter in order to tighten it up into a ball. So start with one piece, fold it over, come over to this side, we'll fold it over, come over here, I'll fold it over, here, I'll fold it over, maybe one more there, maybe one more here, okay? We'll turn that over. You can see we've kind of got roughly a, yeah, it's not a ball, but it's not a big flat piece of dough anymore. So now with that, we'll pull it into the dry piece of counter. We're going to pull it towards us. We're going to hold the bottom in tight with our pinkies. And what that's going to do is We're going to hold this edge in with our hands. This edge is going to catch on this dry counter. It's going to pull everything in. And we're really going to be able to get that ball shape as we rotate this around, just by pulling it towards ourselves like this. And it's important your counter is dry for this, because if you've got flour down here, it's just going to slide across it. And this was one of the harder things for me to believe when I started baking, but it's actually really effective. And I just imagined I was going to have a counter stuck full of dough, you know, but you'll get the hang of it. So I think we've got our ball pretty well shaped here. Last step is just to pick it up, seam side down, and drop it in our proofing basket. Last step for now, we're going to dust the top of the loaf fairly generously. Pat that all in real nice. Got our dish towel we're going to wet with cold water. All right, cold water dish towel. Hold that up. We'll just drop that over the top of this. This is mostly to trap some humidity in there, keep everything happy. And that's all we have. 1 hour from now, that's not all we have actually. I'm going to turn the oven on now. Again, 475 degrees. With my Dutch oven inside with the lid on it. Middle oven rack, 475. And we'll be back in 1 hour to bake a loaf of bread. Thanks for watching. All right, so our French loaf has proofed for an hour. You can see it's much larger than it was. So now we're going to bake a loaf of bread. First thing we're going to do is we're going to dust this top up again. I got a little bit of flour in here that already came in contact with some water, so it's a little delicate there. We'll get a little more fresh flour. I'll dust this up nice and generous. All right, we're going to do the same thing on our countertop in the middle here. Just a little dusting. Bum, 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 bum. All right, get our loaf out of the proofing basket by turning it upside down. Bam, just like that, good to go. Tiny bit more flour on top here. It looks pretty. Awfully happy with the way this looks. Our last step here, we're going to take a razor blade. I'm going to cut 3 slices across the top. 1, 2, 3. Good there. Now we're ready to bake our loaf. So I will get my big fat oven mittens out of the oven. Comes my Dutch oven with the lid preheated at 475 degrees. I don't know if you can see that or not, but safety first. So we'll just kind of spin our loaf around, make sure it's nice and round. Pick it up, do the same thing in our hands. And we're going to drop it in without touching any sides of the Dutch oven. Give it a little shake, spin it around real nice. We'll grab the preheated lid, put it back on. This goes back in the oven. (475 degrees) for 30 minutes. After 30 minutes, we're going to open the oven. We're going to take the lid off. We're going to slide the lid on the shelf underneath the Dutch oven, which is on the middle rack again. After that point, we're going to let it go for about 12 more minutes. And then we're going to have a loaf of bread. So I will see you all then. Thanks for looking. See you in about 42 minutes. Okay, French bread at the end. It's been right at 42 minutes. The first 30 were cooked in the Dutch oven with the lid on. The last 12 have been cooked in the Dutch oven with the lid off. 475 degrees the entire time. Let's get the loaf out and have a look. So we'll just dump it out here. Set it down on the rack. I usually throw my Dutch oven back into the oven to cool, just for safety's sake, because it is very hot and retains heat extremely well. I always have these glasses on. Anyway, here's our French loaf. It looks very nice to me. Tiny bit of char up top. We may have been able to let it go a few minutes longer. This is nice and brown, golden brown over here. Good way to know your loaf is done is to tap it on the bottom. It should sound hollow. I like it. It sounds hollow. So really that's it, folks. This is our French loaf. 18 hours. Poolish first, followed by a bulk ferment, followed by a proofing period, and then we bake. So that's all for now. I will add a short little epilogue to this video sometime when we cut into this bread. Now this isn't done cooking. It needs to rest here and continue to cook for at least probably 30 to 45 minutes. You won't be able to hear it, but if you were here, you could hear it. It's crackling. It's still cooking on the inside, and the outside crust is hardening. So it smells delicious. It sounds delicious. It looks delicious. We'll be back when we cut into it. That could be this evening. It could be tomorrow. At any rate, it's my favorite loaf. It's a French loaf. Hope you guys enjoyed it. We'll see you when we cut in. Thanks for watching. All right, so we're back to cut into our French loaf. I let this cool completely last evening for about 3 hours. Then I put it in a plastic bag. The main reason I like to, I let it cool so that it cooks all the way through. But then the reason I like to put it in a bag overnight is because it makes it a lot easier to cut. It really softens up the outer crust. So without further ado, we'll cut into this bad boy. We'll have a quick look. Definitely has that French bread kind of vinegary, acidic kind of smell to it that I love so much. Get a couple slices here. Big holes, big bubbles. So there we go. That is our French bread tutorial. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you enjoy the bread if you make some. Thanks for watching, guys. Enjoy. Bye-bye.